Hola, I'm Claudia Romo Edelman.
And I'm Cynthia Kleinbaum Milner.
And this is a podcast a la Latina.
The playbook to succeed being your authentic self.
Today, Gabriela Ramirez, Executive Director, Head of Wealth Management USA Field and Strategic Hiring at UBS. And here are the key 3 takeaways.
Number 1, she gave us the tips on how to prepare for an interview to get the job you want.
Number 2, know your priorities and do not put your personal life on hold or take it for granted.
And number 3, how to use your uniqueness as your superpower, particularly what makes you different, makes you stronger.
All of that and more here at A La Latina.
Stick around.
We've been discussing how important it is for Latinas to generate wealth, particularly because we understand that only 33% of Latinas have retirement income from savings or other assets. So how can your company help in this equation?
Well, we have several options for saving and investing accounts. The one for beginners, if you are a beginner, is our fully managed investing product. This is perfect for those who want to set it and forget it. You can select the risk level and even choose the type of companies you can invest in.
That's amazing. So what is the minimum needed to open an account?
$1. You just need $1. No excuses. The earlier you begin to invest, the sooner you will start seeing returns from your investment.
So how can people get started?
Simply download the Money Lion app and open a managed investment account. It's quick. It takes just a few minutes.
Perfect.
Let's do it.
Today, an incredible guest, Gabriela Ramirez.
Gabriela is Executive Director, Head of Wealth Management USA Field and Strategic Hiring at UBS. She's a member of the company's Mosaic Steering Committee, leading its Hispanic community affairs, helping bring together and supporting the growing community of talented UBS employees from all cultures and backgrounds.
She has over 20 years in talent acquisition, executive recruiting, business development, sales, and relationship management roles of some of the most reputable financial institutions, including JP Morgan Chase, Credit Suisse, BlackRock, and Merrill Lynch. Gaby, such an honor to have you with us.
No,
Thank you.
The honor is mine, y tú sabes que te quiero mucho, so this is very special for me. Anytime.
Thank you so, so very much. Gaby, we want to know everything about you.
Oh, we need more than 1 hour, but come on, ask me.
How did it start? How is your background? Tell us more about like who, how, where made you who
I
you
have
are.
an interesting, a different background. I grew up in many different countries in Latin America because my father was a corporate executive and he was assigned Latin America very early on. So we would move, we started migrating south. So we moved to Costa Rica. We lived in Brazil twice, Argentina, Mexico, Chile. So I really got a very robust idea of what it was like to live in Latin America and understand the different cultures. My mother's also from Spain. So I feel like in some way, I cover all of Hispanics and Latins.
Hispanics are 26 different
Yes.
countries in
All
Gaby.
in one
There you go.
person.
Not in one person, but I understand it. And I'll be walking down the street and I'll hear someone and I'll tell my husband that person's from Ecuador. And he's like, how do you know? I said, because I can hear the accent. So how did I start? I mean, I went to American schools. So I grew up learning English and Spanish and Portuguese. And then when I couldn't fit in Portuguese into my high school calendar, my teacher made an agreement and said, you have to learn another language then. So I took French, and languages always came really naturally to me. I think, again, it's my ear.
You should be a musician.
Yeah.
I already have one at home. We don't need to.
Your husband is a musician?
My husband's a classical musician. He plays the trumpet, and he's wonderful. And so I started not knowing, I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I mean, I actually did, and Claudia knows this. I wanted to be an actress. Mm-hmm. And my uncle in Mexico was a very big figure in Televisa. Uh-huh. My family in Mexico was actually very involved in the arts. I also have a part of my family that's very involved in bullfighting. So I knew I wanted to do something artistic. And then when I had a chance to actually enter the academy for Televisa for acting, I decided not to.
Wait, my brother was in the academy.
There you go.
Yeah, maybe you two know each other.
No,
We'll talk about it later.
I got cold feet right when I was getting ready to start. And I remember it's one of those defining moments in my life where I came home and I was living with my brother in Mexico City. And he said, what happened? And I started to cry and I said, I don't think, as much as I want to be an actress, I just don't think I can have that kind of invasion of privacy every day. I can be a very, very outgoing person, but I have a very private side to me, and I didn't think I could do that. And I also had a really strong connection with my father. My father had been a corporate executive, and that's what I grew up watching, which is something that's very important for Hispanics and for diversity, right? If you see something, they always talk about if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I grew up seeing a man leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning with his briefcase and his tie and coming home at night at 8 o'clock at night. And the dinner table, we would talk about work. And so I grew up with the notion that you have to have a career and you have to have a corporate career, and it's good to have a corporate career. So I didn't know which corporate career I was going to have, but when I finished college, I didn't have a green card. I went to college in Boston, and I was like, oh, what do we do now, right? And I think it's something that a lot of us Latinos who come to the United States for an education then have to experience, right? Like, what do we do now? Because we have to apply for a green card. We don't have automatic citizenship. Even though we're well educated, we pay our taxes and all the things that contribute to a really good society, but we have to go back to our roots. And so I went back to Mexico, and I had the fortune of working for a Fortune 500 company. At the time, it was called AT&T. Then it became Lucent Technologies. And they moved us to the United States for a temporary assignment that then became permanent. And that's really what allowed me to then explore other career opportunities. And amongst those career opportunities, I was very fortunate to meet a woman who was a recruiter for Merrill Lynch. And she asked me if I wanted to come and talk to Merrill Lynch. And, like a classic Latina, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I thought I was going in to interview for, you start at the bottom, like a sales assistant. Yeah. And when I get there and they start talking to me, and I'm like, I'm really confused. Why do I need to take all these tests for this job? And they're like, this isn't a sales assistant job. We want to know if you want to become a financial advisor. And I said, again, like a classic Latina, I just said what came to my mind. I'm like, I don't know anything about finance. I don't even know what a bond is. Yeah. And they're like, we can teach you that.
That would be me.
Yeah, no, but it's true, because I know we're not supposed to make general consensus, but as women, we always question how much do we really know. We have ongoing imposter syndrome. And then as Latinas, even more, like, I don't know about that. And so really what it was a sales job, and they really could teach you finance. But what they really wanted to know is, do you have the personality to go out, to meet clients, to find clients, and to bring them into the organization? And so that's what started my career in finance.
Now you are in recruiting, so you probably have like a lot of frameworks of how you pick somebody. But what do you think they saw in you that made you get this job? Like, you didn't have the experience. So what was in your personality that they liked?
I mean, if you would have asked me then, 20-something years ago, I would have been like, I don't know. Today, and it took a long time to really gather that confidence and know myself, it's my ability to build relationships and my ability to build trust. And I think that is no doubt a reflection of having grown up in so many different cultures, having to start and to stop and start relationships, which, by the way, has a very taxing part. We can get into that in a second. But it was my ability to connect with people because I needed to, because I didn't have the luxury to have been somewhere for a really long time. And so it's learning a new language, learning a new culture. It's really your ability to adapt. And then it's your willingness to meet people, to be curious, and your desire to connect. I mean, for me, from a very early age, I would watch my cousins living in one country and their relationships and people, and I always felt this void. And so I always felt like I have to go and meet people and really go deep into their heart. And so I think that has been the trademark of who I am, and it's really the most important thing in terms of my core values. Like, I love people. I want to be of service to people, and that's how I feel the best.
And I think that if we would be 20 years old and they tell you, if you have, if you have the ability to create relationships, to, adapt into circumstances, these are all the careers that you can have. And these are all the things that would be so natural into going. Who knew that being a financial advisor is really, driven by your ability to generate the things that Latinos are so good at, like generating trust. And women, generating trust and relationships and adapting, and you love people. That's who we are. Let's actually
And
start
it's also,
mapping it out.
Women are natural relationship people. They also can manage, they're multitaskers. This is a great career for women, great career for Latinos. And it's also a career that gives you a lot of flexibility because you're meeting with clients, you own your own schedule. And so it's a great, great career for Latins and for women.
I want our audience to really think about what you just said, which is, number one, you didn't say it, but this is what I interpreted. You didn't see in yourself what others saw in you. So sometimes we don't believe in ourselves because we don't have the experience, the seniority, we haven't lived enough years to say, this person has this strength. But if somebody else sees something in you, you should run with it and just go for it. Now, I was thinking, Claudia, this past week, I was thinking, what is my superpower? Early on, what was my superpower in my first job? And for the first time, I realized a connection between my first job and this that we're doing together. I was in my first job at Nestle, and I was very comfortable presenting to the CEO and talking to the CEO. And now I'm talking to all these women that are very senior, very powerful, that I hear from friends. They're like, aren't you nervous interviewing these women? And I'm not nervous. I just feel really curious about your life. I felt that in my first job, and the CEO of Nestle saw it. And they kind of promoted me and gave me room to experience that strength that I had, but I didn't see it. I'm now seeing it.
So it's interesting. I never knew I was going to end up doing recruiting. And I do recruiting. So I've done executive recruiting, and the recruiting that I do is recruiting financial advisors, which is a very different, you don't, it's a very different type of recruiting because you don't have a job description that you go and people are applying for the job, and you really have to develop relationships with people, and in certain ways you're competing with a lot of other firms.
You're vouching.
Yeah, it's hard, and so it's a sales job. And I remember when I first started calling advisors, the sales manager at Merrill Lynch where I worked, I don't think he could wrap around his head that I was getting meetings and he wasn't. And so he called me into his office one day and he said, do you mind making a few phone calls? I want to hear what you say to people. And till this day, I still speak to him. And I said, I bet you thought I was doing something shady. And he said, I just, he heard me on the phone and he said, okay, you can go back to your desk. And then he went and spoke to my boss at the time and said, I don't think recruiting should just be like a part of her job. I think it should be her entire job. And that's how I went into recruiting. And I will say that to your point about your superpower, I still question myself, like, this is easy. Like, why is everybody complaining about calling advisors? It's easy. You get rejected next. And I think it was a combination of two things. One is I've been described by some people as being fearless. And again, that word is so big and it makes me feel like, why would
negative?
Not negative, but like you don't want to, like another thing that Latinas do, we don't want to brag. So it's like fearless, like who would use that word to describe me? But it's more of I am not afraid. Like my father raised me always saying to me, what's the worst thing that can happen? Someone says no. And then you go and ask again.
Yeah.
And so I'm known for that. One of my bosses at UBS describe me as pleasantly annoying because I don't care. I have no shame. It's not like I'm doing something that I'm embarrassed about. I have a job to do. And so I call people and
But it is like, I do want to adhere to that. And I know you and I've been described. But I think that we should remove the word less and put it as free. So fear-free. Because fear is not going to take the decisions of your life.
Yeah.
And shame-free, because you're not ashamed to say things the way they are. I'm not shameless.
And I like what I'm doing. And by the way, a really important part of this, right? I work for UBS. I love recruiting for UBS because I believe in the brand. And so this is why it's really important to love what you do and believe what you do, because I couldn't be fear-free if I didn't believe in what I did and I didn't think I was doing the right thing. If I didn't believe in what I did, then it would be a challenge because then I wouldn't be able to call you and say, Claudia, let's do this together, or call an advisor and say, you need to come talk to UBS. I need to believe in it. And I think that's also a very, very characteristic of a woman and Latinos. We need to put our passion and believe in something.
So I do want to repeat this piece because Ana Corrales from Google also said it, one of the most memorable things that I have learned through this podcast, which is listen to yourself early on. What you're good at, what comes naturally, is your super talent, is your superpower. And then you can start seeing like, okay, I love product. Where, in which industry can I use that to my best advantage? And so go lean in into what comes natural to you, because that's probably where we have the misunderstanding. We think that education, formal education, and the things that you put in your CV is what is going to get you there, but it is actually what you're good at.
And Cynthia, you asked me a question, what do I look for in talent? And you just hit right on it. I look for skills that are transferable. I look for people who have passion, but most importantly, anybody can put together a really good resume. I mean, there's people who write resumes for a living. And so I always tell people, your resume is great, it gets you in, it filters you to understand that you have the basics, right? But when we're talking about companies like the ones that we work in, like I'm already expecting a certain level of professionalism. What I'm really looking for is the person resilient? Is the person honest? Does the person have integrity? Is the person kind? Is the person curious? Because those are the little things that really tell you about the person and really tell you the story about a person. The rest, I'm assuming they know what they're doing if they've already gotten to where they've gotten in their career, right?
So how do you test for resilience or integrity or kindness?
I have conversations with people and I start to ask them about themselves, and then I shut up and I let them talk. And when you let people talk, it's amazing how much they reveal about themselves. And I believe the devil is in the details. And so when you see how people talk about their family, how they talk about how they've overcome obstacles, how they've talked about different situations in their life, it starts to show you who they really are. And at the end of the day, I have a rule. I hire good people.
Yeah.
And you can't replicate good people. You can't replicate kindness. You can't replicate integrity. So I ask questions that are open-ended, and I let people talk.
I once heard somebody, I know this is like a very rigid rule, but maybe you will agree that it tells you something about the person, which is somebody from my team was interviewing a candidate that I wanted to hire. And after the interview, the person came to me and said, I'm a no. And I said, why? And he said, because he only used I. And when you interview somebody and they take all the credit for the successes of their team and it's everything, I did this. That was his rule. If somebody only used I and didn't say we as a team, he wouldn't hire that person. I couldn't hire that person.
Now, you bring up a great point also, because I'm also a big believer in giving feedback. Because there's a lot of people that I've worked with who have interviewed candidates and they reject someone, but then they don't tell the candidate why. And so in the case that you're talking about, if the person only used I and no one has taken the time to tell this individual, you really need to change things. Like I had a situation where I had lost a job and I went to meet with a headhunter and I was still in that very raw, not happy, kind of bitter side. And this person was doing a friend of mine a favor to interview me. And when I sat down in his office and he said, what happened? And I started talking because I was still really angry. We finished the conversation and he said, I'm going to give you some advice. You're still angry and it's coming through. And that's not going to help you find a new job. And I'm grateful, because if he had not told me that, I would have gone to every single other interview not
get
aware,
every time more angry.
and not aware of what was happening.
Bad-mouthing. A lot of people go to an interview and bad-mouth the previous employer, thinking that that's going to make them look good. No.
So I think one is I like to give people feedback, and I also think it's really important that people also recognize. I get calls from people saying I didn't get the job. Like sometimes the job you don't get is the best job. Is the best thing that could have happened to you, and I really believe in that. I think that not every opportunity is for you. And it's not a bad thing, because not everybody belongs everywhere. And there are different phases in our lives, and life takes us where we are. I really believe, and again, that I think that only comes with age, but I really believe that it gets to a point in your career where if you're happy and you've done the homework, you realize that you are where you have to be and you own your career. And, my father, again, you asked who, my father was everything to me. One of the things he always said to me is, just because you haven't gotten to where you're going or your journey to get there is different than someone else's, it doesn't mean you're not going to get there, and it doesn't mean your journey is wrong. And so, there's a song in Mexico, El Rey. which is one of my favorite songs, the mariachi songs, que no importa el camino, sino lo importante es llegar, right? It doesn't matter how quick you get there, the important thing is getting there. And so that's also really important.
Did you want to sing? We have never had anyone.
But I do want to, like, we're so happy to learn, I think, that for the audience, tips and tricks about like how to interview, right? And so I think that what you're saying is do not only come with your resume about the things that you have accomplished, let the recruiter feel who you are. And Latinas, we're wonderful. So let that kindness and let that transparency of caring for your family and your everything show. Don't repress it in interviews. Just put the academic and the things that you have managed, but also yourself. Is that what you're saying?
I actually think that most minorities, it's undisputable, unnegotiable. You have to show up 100% or more. Like you just have to. Like you can't rely on anything. Like the job is the job, and you have to do it better than anybody else. That's
and you have to demonstrate that in your interview.
And you have to, you have to be prepared. There's no substitute for preparation and being ready. Now, as a Latina, you're talking about a whole nother layer that comes of complexity, which is beautiful. I think Latinas are caring people. I think they articulate well. I think they're warm. But again, it depends on the job, because not every job is going to require those qualifications. But what is undeniable for me, and I tell this to Latinos, and I tell this to any diverse person that I coach or that I speak with, is your preparation and being, doing what you need to do is non-negotiable. You have to show up, and sometimes you have to show up 150%.
But you know what? I'm so sorry. Just like I do want to get a little deeper, because we've been talking in this podcast about flipping the script. And when you come to an interview, you don't know if the other person knows or has unconscious biases because they're unconscious. So you could say, look, I have an accent because I speak different languages, and that means that I can speak to different groups and that I'm great at negotiation. And, as a Latina, I'm caring, which means I can build relationships. You can help your recruiter turn those, flip the script in case 100%. They don't know
100%.
That, like you're loud, but that means that you're committed, that you have an accent, which means that you're bilingual, that you can talk to different groups. So I think that we just have to be better prepared and better understanding of our power and help the recruiter understand that those things are actually quite positive.
No, 100%. And also, another thing that happens very early on, people are trying to figure out what they want to do or they want a job, but they don't know what it is. I always tell people, nobody's going to know what you want better than you. People will tell you what they think is good for you, but nobody's going to know you better than you. And what other people tell you isn't necessarily the truth. And so as Latinas, you have to be careful because you don't want to be typecast. You don't want to be put in a job because somebody thinks that's the right job for you. If you want something, you need to advocate for yourself. And you need to know what you want. And once you know what you want, don't settle for less.
All right.
So how did you do it? Because you've been into some of the most reputable financial services companies in the US, and you've climbed the ladder. What has been your recipe? How have you advocated for yourself to get
I've built great relationships, but I don't want to fool anyone. My ladder has had lots of mistakes, and sometimes I've had to go several steps down to go move back up. So I think it's also important not to create an illusion that the ladder is vertical. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's like a jungle gym. Sometimes you have to move around.
We've heard that.
Sometimes you have to, and so this is why I mentioned earlier, resilience is so important, and not giving up. Some of the greatest minds in any profession that you think of have tried something multiple times before it actually became successful. And sometimes it takes people rejecting you. Sometimes it takes getting fired. Sometimes it takes really painful situations. And I actually believe wholeheartedly that one of the things I look for the most, to your question earlier, is people who've overcome challenges and who've overcome, I don't like to use the word when you failure, because failure has such a negative connotation, but someone who has had a
Failed
setback.
And get up.
Has had a setback. And I really look for people with setbacks because I think the world that we live in today is so complicated. There are so many challenges going on everywhere. And I look for people who are able to get past that, go through challenging times, manage through change, and lead through that. And we're resilient.
So you have shared with us some of your superpowers. You have shared the latter has been, like
Very shaky at times.
how much of your success has been enhanced, and how was your journey in actually getting recognized as well? Because we see you in all the magazines and, like in all the lists and so on. How much does that help? And
It helps a lot.
go on.
I mean, I think that when I hear people say, "Oh, just do your job and it'll be fine," it's yes, you have to do your job. Going back to what I said, you have to show up 110%. But having recognition, having support, having sponsorship absolutely goes a long way. And anyone who says it doesn't is lying. It absolutely goes a long way. But a lot of the times, the sponsorship and the recognition comes from doing a good job. And so, again, it's about staying in the race. I also had a mentor who said to me once, your career is not a sprint, it's a marathon. So keep going. And so what that means is, find mentors, help others. I truly believe that if you do right by others and you do a good job, somebody somewhere is watching, and eventually you'll get that recognition. But I also think that you can't sit back and wait for people to come and tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, do you want this next job?" Or "I'm thinking about you for this." You have to advocate for yourself. And that's something that, particularly I think corporate America really teaches people you're in it for yourself. And that's something that in our culture sometimes can be very challenging, because Latins are all about family, they're all about helping each other. And then Latinas, we have a double whammy, right? Because it's not just about helping, being a good sister, a good mother, a good friend. We're always taking care of everybody. And sometimes that's a little bit at odds with corporate America.
But wait, so we don't do self-advocacy or self-promotion as much because we're family-oriented and community-oriented. But we do have to find a way
we feel
in
uncomfortable.
which...
Because
you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But we should find a way in which the community pushes you up. I mean, like pretty much we've seen it in other communities, which is like you give to una para mí, una para todos, no? So like the community pushes you up and open the doors for each other. If we would be all family, but then the family opens your door and showcase you and puts you in this podcast and in this magazine, then there would be different.
So it's interesting. Some of the Latinas that I know who've been very successful, they met somebody. Like I have a lot of white male allies, and they say, "I had a Latina assistant," or "I had a Latina working for me." And they see how they work with them, and they see the passion they bring to work, and then they promote that person. Yeah. And so I think the more Latinos and the more Latinas we start to see, which I think we're coming a long way.
We're coming a long way.
The more we have people like that, the more people are going to take notice and say, "Wow, my team, we have a lot of Latinas on our team." And it wasn't, I don't think my boss picked them on purpose, but I think he probably loves the fact that we have a lot of strong opinions and passionate women, and we're strong. Latinas are strong.
Yeah. I want to go back to your career, because I was very interested when I saw your journey. And there's something that I saw there that it's not very common, which is you left jobs multiple times and then went back to that company. How did you leave the doors open for you to be able to go back?
Two things. One is what I do it pretty well. Mm-hmm. Even that makes me feel uncomfortable saying it, but I do it really well.
Let's do it again. Let's record it. Okay.
No, I mean, I'm really good at what I do. It took me a really long time to say that and not like be embarrassed about it, but I am. I'm really good at what I do. Mm-hmm. And I've only gotten better because I've gotten more confident and I've had more experience. And I've built relationships with people who have opened those doors for me again. And I actually one time said, "Oh, well, am I being hired back because I'm liked?" And on Wall Street, nobody does anything because they like you. It's because you're good. But it helps to have those relationships because you are in the thought of people. And so I think that I've been able to go back because I had good relationships in the places that I worked in. And I was really good at something that was useful to that company.
But is there these are the three things you should do, like always transition very well, stay in touch with the people from your company?
So I haven't always done that. Uh-huh. I haven't, full disclosure. And I've learned my lessons from that. But it's very important that you transition with grace. It's very important that, one of the things I hear a lot of people do really well, and I really admire is when they, when you're getting interviewed for a job, it's usually a lengthy time. It could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months or longer. So there are people that knowing that they're going to leave, you could kind of say,
Yeah.
and the people that I respect the most are the people that knowing that they're going to leave, they run even faster because they want to leave saying, I did a really good job, I'm leaving, and miss me now. And so I think it's really important that when you transition with class or, grace, that you don't burn any bridges, and that you do a very good job until the very last day at that company. And by the way, Wall Street is, no stranger to mergers. I always tell people, and there's a saying, Wall Street is a small street. So, today, and I always tell advisors when I talk to them, when I call them, have a conversation with us because you never know if one day we're all going to work in the same company. And there's plenty of examples of that. Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Smith Barney, Morgan Stanley. And so I believe it's really important to maintain really good relationships with people all across because you never know when you're going to run
Wall
into.
Street is a small street. Are Latinos walking in the street? Like knowing how much wealth we're going to be generating, knowing how much our purchasing power is $3.7 trillion, knowing that Latinas generate $1.3 trillion, which is amazing. I would assume that all eyes on us will be the case and that Wall Street will want Latino money. Do we have Latinos in financial institutions?
And you didn't mention Latinas are the #1 business owners as well.
Right.
I think there are quite a bit of Latinos in financial institutions. I would say that in the last 10 years, I am seeing a lot of them advance even more in high positions.
Good. Well, yeah, actually, we have a couple of number 2s at least.
Yep. I don't think we are where we should be yet. And I think you bring up a great point, which is the wealth creation and just having the wealth. You have a lot of Latinos who have come from countries where they've had to leave because of geopolitical reasons, people who've come here for higher education, people who've come here with their companies. And so you have a lot of very well-educated professionals and people who've created a lot of businesses and wealth that are Latinos. And so I think it is still that we're underrepresented in financial services. And I think at some point it's going to be the tipping point because I think there's a lot of opportunities with high net worth and ultra high net worth Latinos, and probably would be helpful to have people with the same cultural affinity servicing those clients.
Well, wait. Let me ask you. Better. Are Latinos? Are the financial institutions having the culture and the adaptation to attract more and more Latinos in as part of their staff?
I think some are doing it better than others.
Okay. Yeah. Because I do think
like
that
everything else in life.
All eyes on our wallets. I just wanted to know whether all eyes on our in recruitment as well.
I think it's definitely in conversation. And I think it's something that everybody's probably paying attention to. Some people are probably a little more advanced than others.
So if we let's assume that we have 3 buckets of Latinas listening to this podcast. Young Latinas who just are graduating from college, then some that are early in their career, and some that are already at a director level. Can you tell them how can they get a job in UBS? What does somebody early in their career should do, today if they want a job in UBS, et cetera?
If they're recent graduates?
Yeah, recent graduates.
So there's a lot of opportunities at UBS. We have what we call our Wealth Advice Center, which is a great opportunity for people who are not licensed, who want to understand financial services. So for people who were like me 20-something years ago and who were I don't know what a bond is, it's a great opportunity because they teach you about financial planning, they teach you about asset allocation, you get licensed. It's a great way to start working with smaller clients. And then you are also exposed to some of the larger teams at UBS, right? You get to network, you're already in the system. And when they are looking to hire someone younger, or, with a different background to complement skills that they already have on their team, you're there and it's an obvious place to
And there's no experience needed.
You have to have a college education.
Yes. Some internships, but...
And again, you bring up a great point. Internships, going to events, your career is also have to be self-directed. Nobody gives you anything. That's one of my things that, my pearls of wisdom. Nadie te regala nada. Like, you have to go after the things you want.
Yeah, but we want to give them some advice.
No, eso sí,
Okay,
eso
so
sí te lo
great.
regalo. Con mucho gusto.
And then if somebody, let's say that somebody already started their career, and regardless of if they're in financial services or not, because you had a change. You started at Zara in operations,
No, I actually
right?
started as a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch.
And then?
I went to Bear Stearns, and one of my clients was the head of Inditex in the United States. And when I was having one of my many moments, which I think we all have, of like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I like fashion.
And
I can see Gabby going
100%.
I like fashion.
I love fashion.
Yes, and then she went to operations.
And then he said, and I said, operations. And he said, no, I need somebody, again, the skill set was relationship management, because I had to deal with all the providers, with the people who, all the partners that would work in the stores, anything from real estate, air conditioning, supplies. So it was really a relationship job. But fashion is very different from financial services. And I think that my father's roots were really heavy, and I needed the structure, and I needed more of that corporate world. It was a great experience. It was when Zara was growing. It was a great experience.
So there's so many things that you can do when you're good at relationship management,
100%.
operations.
No
recruitment.
AI application is gonna replace good relationship
That's
building.
right. Yeah. So I want to go back to you and just ask, knowing you, also, did you have to dial down? Like, when did you have to dial down? Tell us about the bruises of being Latina in an environment that is, first of all, is a Swiss company. I get it. I lived in Switzerland for almost 20 years. I'm like, where did it hurt the most?
One of the things that people would say to me early on in my career was that I was very emotional. And I think of the word emotion as a positive thing. Like, it's good to have emotion, right? You have blood in your veins, you love people. Like, it's great to be emotional. And I didn't understand when people would keep saying that to me. And it wasn't until not so long ago that I understood, and I started doing some work and reading, that what they meant by emotional is that you could have, ups and downs that I think are very innate in the Latin culture, because we talk with our hands, we're very expressive. Latinas are also very intense. And so I've had several people in my career slowly but surely tell me the same message. And it's good to have emotion, it's good to have passion, but you have to learn how to dial it down and know when to dial it up. And that took time for me to realize. And so I thought just bringing myself and being who I was okay. It is okay, but not everywhere. And so the bruises came from realizing that sometimes know your audience. It really comes down to that. Know your audience, know yourself, and know that you can't always express everything everywhere. And so that took time for me to realize. And so now when I've gotten to know myself,
but I also know you. You're also not satisfied with injustice and
Not
when
at
things. So I can only imagine you biting your tongue and just like holding yourself to the chair when you see that, there's some sort of like discrimination or biases against,
I have learned to sometimes, an advice that was given to me many years ago, and I didn't apply it until recently, the last couple of years. Sometimes a good night's sleep is the best thing in the world. It takes a lot of training. It's hard.
But not to react, no?
Not to react and to take a step back. And also, my boss always tells me, assume positive intent. It was such a hard thing because as Latinos, we're always suspicious. Where are they going to take advantage of me? This person is going to do something. And so we're always like almost anticipating that something's going to go wrong because it's so ingrained in our culture.
Yeah.
And so I think 24-hour rule, taking a step back, maybe even taking a walk around the block, maybe calling a friend. It takes training. I'm not gonna lie, it does not come easy. For me, it does not come easy. And so it's taken a lot of training, and it really, again, to my point of resilience. If I had not had those bruises, I might have never learned this. If I had not had some people say some things to me that were really painful when they said them to me, but thank you so much that they said them to me, because if they hadn't, I would be a train wreck.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, it seems like you have you've gained a lot of perspective. Even though you look 20, it seems like you have the perspective of somebody that is older than 20.
But I do want to stay there, just like on the learning and the flipping the script.
I have to thank my mom for that, because I've mentioned my dad a lot, and I love my father. My father's passed, and he was the best thing in the world for me. Thank God I met my husband.
But the genes.
And she would be really mad at me if she heard this podcast and I didn't say that, because she always says, tú tienes la cara que tienes por mi familia, la piel que tienes por mi familia. Yeah. So my mother is, I learned how to dress because of my mother. I learned how to present because of my mother. I learned how to put on my makeup because of my mother. And these are all things that should, as superficial and fluffy as they sound, it's important to have a first good impression. And I owe that to my mother wholeheartedly.
Yeah, absolutely. So on flipping the script, you've been there, done that, particularly in the financial sector. What are things that, what you just said, emotion is perceived as negative, but in reality, if you flip it, could be a positive. What are the things that you see that are more unconscious biases in corporate America, particularly in the financial sector, that are Latinos that could be flipped if we put into the surface?
I think emotion. So I've had people say, I had a situation where I was on a call with a bunch of people, and somebody asked a question about something, and it was a C-suite executive on the call, and I wanted to get my point across, and I was very emotional and passionate about, let me explain to you how this works. And somebody was on the call and said to me, you're talking to a C-suite executive, like they sent me a message, like tone it down. Mm-hmm. And then when I got off the call, I said to this person, was I that bad? And the person said, maybe a little. And so I was so mortified that I sent an email to the person saying, I am so sorry. I'm just really passionate about that. I don't think I even said passionate. I'm so sorry. I feel very strongly about this because a lot of people don't realize how this is done. And it's what I've been doing for a long time. And again, I went to bed, I went home, I was like, oh my God, this person's gonna think I'm crazy. The next morning I get to the office and there's an email from my inbox from this person. Again, is a C-suite executive at the firm saying, Gabriela, you did nothing wrong. I actually really appreciate you being so passionate and wanting to explain things the way that you did and owning them. And so you're not gonna make everybody happy, right? And so what somebody perceives as, you're coming across really emotional, somebody else perceived as, I love your passion.
And again, if you're interviewing for a job, if you're emotional and passionate, just say, that translates to commitment. That translates to loyalty, so that people know it.
100%.
And when you put it on the surface, it's like, oh, okay, done. 100%. I know that I can try, like if I need someone to explain to evangelize something, I'm going to put this Latina because she's 100%. Passionate.
Another word that's used all the time, it's kind of like cliche, but it's true. It's used for women all the time. She's too aggressive. But when you hear it for a man, he's too aggressive. It's a good thing. And, I have some colleagues that are Latinos, men, who have had an amazing career on Wall Street because they're passionate, because they're aggressive. But when you see a man do it, it's unconsciously, it's like, it's okay, it's acceptable. When you see a woman, a Latina, a 5-foot-tall Latina, it's kind of like, what's going on here?
Oh, imagine a 6-foot-tall.
So I'm going to tell you what my 6-foot-tall co-host would say if you were in that situation and you ask her, should I send this email? She always tells me, do not apologize. Of course you apologize if you did something wrong. But if not, it's like you did what you thought was right and do not apologize. Because it's almost like I find myself writing emails or starting conversations with, I'm sorry, but X. And she's like, I don't think I've heard you say I'm sorry once since I've met you. And
I have to call you more
important.
often because I apologize for everything. And it's something that is so difficult to break that habit. Yeah. And I've become very aware of it. I should not be apologizing. But
we should just turn tables. And I think that this is the end of the flipping the script. We have to turn tables and understand that what we think is shame, is negative, is only because other people are saying it's negative. Nothing, it doesn't take the value away from that commitment and that passion. So you just have to be aware and present it to others so that we can turn tables and be in the position of power.
Yeah.
And be confident.
Okay. Now, with all your perspective,
yes.
What advice would you give your 30-year-old self?
So it's not a professional advice, it's a personal advice, but it's important for women, I think. I did not get this advice. And I put my career ahead of my personal life. And I always thought that because I was young and young looking and felt young, my fertility and my ability to have children would be extended, and it wasn't. And so I made some very, very big personal sacrifices because I always felt like I can't take my foot off the pedal because I'm not ready right now. I'm not ready right now. And by the time my husband said, this is a priority, it was too late. And my spiritual side will never allow me to regret things because I think God has a plan for everybody. And I believe in God wholeheartedly. But I wish I would have been able to be a mother. Mm-hmm. So I always tell young people that don't take your fertility for granted. A job, as important as it is, it's just a job. Your family and the people you love are way more important than any job. Your health is way more important than any job. And if you want something in your life, don't put it off for a job. And if you do, it's because you really love your job more. And, it is what it is.
Yeah,
freeze your eggs, make the time.
I cannot be more grateful for your vulnerability to share it because I think that a number of us think and do things and sacrifice things and never share them. And we don't share them with people early enough in their lives.
You don't have to be a mother to be motherly. Everybody who knows me and my firm knows I love cats. So I treat my cats like my family. I have found other ways to basically nurture. And this is why Latinas and young women are so important to me because I really want to nurture them as a mother, even though they're not my children. But it's the one regret that I wish all women would know that their time passes and it really does.
I think this is a conversation that behind closed doors happens a lot, but it's not happening
100%.
in the professional setting in
100%.
public enough. So I think hearing from you, hopefully...
Fertility and menopause have been taboo topics.
Yeah.
Very important topics that affect women that I think should be normalized, just like mental health is becoming more normalized, because they're real. And it's important to feel natural about it.
And I think that El Rey, La Canción, plus the knowledge that everything will be okay would probably lead people to take decisions early on about saying like, it's going to be okay. I'm going to make it maybe later so you can pedal down and you can actually put your life
100%.
forward.
Life is very long. When we're young, we think we have to have everything ready and done because time's running out. And life is very long. It's a marathon.
And everything will be okay.
Everything will be fine.
No importa cómo, pero hay que saber llegar.
Hay que saber llegar. And the other great thing that my mother always said is, no soy monedita de oro para caerle bien a todos. So I'm not a gold coin. Not everybody has to like me.
We like you.
We love you.
Yes, we love you.
You're incredible.
Yes.
Thank you so much for saying this
Thank
and
you.
doing this.
Thank you.
Gabi, we cannot be more grateful for you sharing your story, being so vulnerable, and being with us today.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Thank both of you. And thanks for doing this, honestly, because it's such a great platform for women and it's a great platform for Latina women. And it's just, that's another thing that happens a lot on Wall Street, right? Like people support each other in groups. And I think Latinos need to raise each other and really help each other because at the end of the day, we're here to stay.
And that's exactly what we want because with people like you, we're going to be able to lead and succeed
A la Latina.